Welcome back. This is session 3 of the series of Proofpoint and cloud archiving technologies. For the last couple sessions, we've talked about the core architecture and security considerations with moving email archiving solutions to a cloud-based solution. In the next few sessions, we're going to talk about the key use cases, eDiscovery, compliance, and end-user access that relate to an email archiving solution. In this session specifically, we're going to talk about how email archiving can help you address the cost and complexity related to legal holds and the eDiscovery process in general, as well as some of the best practices as it relates to these discovery challenges. So why do we even care about this? Discovery has a growing number of challenges. First of all, litigation is on the rise. More and more organizations are facing litigation and they're having to do discovery for this. And the costs of discovery are growing. With the amount of data that exists out there growing exponentially, the cost of discovering all that data and culling it and getting it to court is growing. And the reality is that courts are much more strict about the process that needs to be followed for part of this. Email is a large component of this. In fact, 60 to 85% of all eDiscovery requests relate to email because that's really where a lot of the conversations and the data exist. And so being able to get your handle around email is increasingly important. Because of this growing cost and complexity, there's a growing drive to reduce the eDiscovery costs. In the past, eDiscovery costs were kind of considered part of doing business, but now there really is pressure from the CEO on down to reduce his costs and figure out how you can reduce the legal burden. But balancing that, there's growing scrutiny around legal holds and preservation. The courts have become, as I mentioned, extremely strict about what organizations are doing to make sure they preserve all potential evidence for a lawsuit and there is no spoliation of this data. So organizations are challenged with increasing costs, more scrutiny on how these costs and processes are managed, but yet a pressure to drive the costs down. And so this is a balance that email archiving solutions can help with. A recent survey by the Forrester Group looked at some of the leading concerns that organizations have around eDiscovery and legal challenges in general. And as you can see, some of the key concerns are around managing the legal hold process and the eDiscovery process. And so that's really what we'll talk about, how an email archiving solution can help you deal with those today. So how do organizations typically deal when they have to do eDiscovery for email? An eDiscovery request comes into IT. I need email for these users, these custodians, these time ranges, maybe these keywords. Please go find it to me. And so suddenly there's this rapid scurry where on the one hand you have to go back to tapes, backup tapes that exist of your mail service, restore those tapes for what email might have looked like back a year ago, 2 years ago, and try to pull the data out of there. We all know that tape restoration many times doesn't work, and if it does, it's extremely costly and complex. And so there's a lot of work and money and time that goes into that. In addition, users may have a lot of this data in PST files on their desktops or laptops or home directories. So again, scurrying out, trying to find this information, pull it in, and pull the right information from there. And then lastly, you actually go to your mail server and grab the information out of the mail server, which is probably the easiest of these processes, but still complex and time-consuming. And then the big problem has that now you may have massive amounts of duplicates. So you either have to go through the large amount of work to reduce those duplicates, or much more costly, you pass that along to outside counsel or your litigation service provider, and you have them have a broader set of data that they need to deduplicate. And the cost of managing this eDiscovery process is directly correlated to the amount of messages that need to be reviewed and processed. And so the more messages that are sent downstream, the more costly this is. And the reality is that the downstream processes of having lawyers manually review every single one of these messages is extremely costly. And so really the onus on organizations today is to A, find a very cost-effective and timely way to gather the information you need, and second of all, be able to pass the least amount of data, but all the data that is relevant, downstream further on with the eDiscovery process. And this is really where an email archiving solution can come into place, because you can have one set of data in one place that's easily searchable, where you can gain access to all of this data literally within a few seconds. And so the value of an email archive is to have a retention period that is greater to what you may have in your mail server or to what users may have in PSTs, if you allow that at all, and then be able to go to that one place and collect the data. What do you have now? Literally within seconds, you can collect the data that you need for eDiscovery. You can have it be produced in a deduplicated, thinned down fashion so you can reduce your cost downstream, and you can save weeks and weeks worth of work and thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of costs. The other benefit of having everything in one place is from a preservation or legal hold point of view. The duty is on organizations to put on hold any potential evidence for any potential lawsuit. And so the typical way that is done today is email sent out to custodians saying, please don't delete any data relevant to this lawsuit, which of course you're then depending on end users doing the right thing. With a proper eDiscovery enabled archiving solution, you simply point and click, put in place a legal hold within the archive, and you can ensure that that data will not be deleted no matter what happens for the life of that lawsuit. Again, tremendously simplifying the process and, more importantly, reducing the risk of spoliation of data. So what are some of the key capabilities that the Proofpoint email archiving solution provides today? First of all, it is a centralized repository that is stored in a cloud in a manner that's extremely easy to manage and cost-effective for the organization. A very flexible policy engine that allows IT, document management, legal, compliance, security to define retention policies for all of the data and very flexibly define those policies in the system. So every single message gets defined with a proper retention policy and is stored for the proper length of time. From a search point of view, we allow either end users to search their own data, but more importantly for this use case, legal or compliance or HR to be able to search the entire archive and get the results back within seconds. In fact, Proofpoint is the only software as a service or cloud email archiving solution that has an SLA that guarantees the search performance no matter how big your email archive is. So now a legal person is very simply can go in and search the archive repeatedly and really understand what is the data that's there without IT having to play any part in this process. Now, once you've defined that there is a potential lawsuit, you need to put data on hold, you can easily put that data on hold. A combination of historical data, you may know specifically what keywords, which custodians, or what date ranges you want to put in place, or more broadly, you can simply define a set of custodians that you want to hold all historical and future data for, and automatically, as new messages are sent, received, and archived, they're added to the holds. When data is put on hold, no matter what the retention policy is, you can ensure that that data is not deleted. Of course, once you go down the eDiscovery process, you will want to export the data from the archive and pass it on to outside counsel or an eDiscovery tool. So we provide very flexible ways in which you can do that and export gigabytes and gigabytes worth of data yourself from the archive. And of course, an extremely important part of this process is to then dispose of the data when it should be disposed of. As soon as a message's retention policy is up or legal hold is no longer required, legal can easily, or IT can easily say those messages should be disposed of, and immediately those messages are no longer available to be accessed and are no longer discoverable. Extremely important to ensure you don't have over-preservation of data and increase your risk in case of a future lawsuit. Now let's look at one case study. One of Proofpoint's customers, Graubard Miller, a law firm actually based in New York. Graubard Miller put in place a Proofpoint email archiving solution to help reduce their own eDiscovery cost for their own internal email. In addition, they also used our storage management capabilities, which we'll talk about in a couple of sessions, to reduce the cost of their Exchange infrastructure. They estimate that they were able to save $200,000 to $400,000 per case in discovery costs by having a centralized place in which they're easily able to put in place legal holds as well as search and discover and export data, reducing, of course, their overall cost of litigation tremendously. One example of a small organization is able to save tremendous amount of money by proactively putting in place an eDiscovery archiving solution. So let's talk briefly about some of the best practices. First of all, one of the key challenges organizations have is defining their retention policy. And many times this will hinder an organization from putting in place a proactive archiving solution to help reduce their costs. Best practice around there, first of all, start archiving. Don't define your policy from day one, but simply have a centralized capture of places. Then determine what your policy will be, and you can retroactively put that in place, and Proofpoint allows you to do so. So don't let discussions around retention policies get in the way of immediately starting to consolidate a centralized location. Now, once you do discuss and determine what your retention policy is, best practice is to have the retention policy in your email archive be equal to or greater than what it is in Exchange, so you're sure that what's in the archive is a superset of what may be in your mail server, and don't allow users to keep their own PSTs. You can now allow users to access any old message in the archive, and again, by not having PSTs, you can ensure that every single message that exists in your organization is in your archive, and from a discovery point of view, you can easily attest to the fact that you're meeting your retention policies, and you can quickly put on place hold and produce data as needed. Now, these retention policies may be complicated. Based on regulatory or geographic requirements, you may need to have different retention policies for different groups of users or different countries or regions or even divisions within a large organization. So what you really want is a tool that allows you to have the flexibility to define different policies for different groups of users or different types of messages. Around search and preservation, many times it's a very manual process. So obviously what you want is a system that automatically allows you to very quickly search and put content on hold without a lot of user intervention, without hours or days of back and forth between IT and legal. And as a key part of that, having legal have direct access to the archive so they can self-serve and do their own searches allows them to really get a better feel for what that data is. The process of having legal ask for IT for set of data, having IT then provide that to legal, this sort of back and forth and throw the requests over the wall puts a lot of hindrance on efficiency in the process, as well as legal really being able to understand the scope of the data. Having direct access in a very simple, fast, and comprehensive tool allows legal to really manage that early part of a legal case a lot more effectively. So to summarize here, who is Proofpoint? For those of you who don't know us as well, Proofpoint is a leading provider of email security, compliance, and archiving solutions for mid to large enterprises. We provide these capabilities to some of the world's largest organizations, as well as regional organizations around the United States and the world. Key capabilities that Proofpoint provides are Proofpoint Enterprise Protection, our suite of solutions to protect your inbound email stream from spam, viruses, malware, phishing attacks, etc. Proofpoint Enterprise Privacy, our set of outbound controls that look at outbound email for privacy or confidential information and enforce appropriate policies, maybe to block that content, to quarantine that content, or optionally to encrypt those messages with Proofpoint Encryption, a tool to very easily provide gateway-based email encryption where any recipient, independent of what software they're running on the other side, are able to decrypt that message. And of course, Proofpoint Enterprise Archive, the solution we've been talking about here. All of these solutions leverage the power of the cloud, but can also be deployed in a hybrid mode or on-premise through appliances or virtual appliances. So Proofpoint can help you beyond email archiving, excuse me, to provide a full set of security and compliance capabilities around email. Thank you.